And we are here. It's This Week in Science, ready to science the heck out of your Wednesday or your Thursday, if that's what day it is for you. Maybe it's a Tuesday. Whatever day it is, we are here with the This Week in Science live podcast broadcast, and we hope that you are going to enjoy the next tight 90 minutes of science.
We'll see what we can do.
We gotta do it. And yeah, there may be things in the show that are deleted for the podcasts and the radio show later, but this is the big old live thing. So if that's what you're watching, that's what you're watching. Are we ready for a show, folks?
Let's do it.
Let us science. I mean, is there lettuce in there? All right. I don't have lettuce science tonight. I'm just let us. Starting the show in...
You gave up.
I did. I never give up. I just save it for later. I mean, that's what all the little holes in the teeth are for. Okay. Beginning in a 3, a 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 874, recorded on Wednesday, May the 4th, 2022. May the 4th be with us. And with you, with all of us. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we will fill your head with birds, bats, and black holes. But first...
Disclaimer. The Supreme Court of the United States has written a legal opinion to overturn Roe versus Wade, joining a short list of countries which prevent women from having reproductive rights, which include Egypt, Libya, Senegal, Iran, Afghanistan, El Salvador, Honduras, Philippines, Laos, Nigeria, and the popular pseudo-socialistic right-wing boogeyman, Venezuela. Now, it is important to keep in mind that the legal shift would primarily affect states that have already passed laws to impose abortion bans should Roe versus Wade be overturned. These include states like Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia, to name a few, all of which voted for slavery the last time that was the thing you could vote for in America, which isn't completely fair, seeing as how that was over 150 years ago. The Confederacy only lasted for 4 years, and only some people in those states still claim the 4-year fight for slavery as their heritage, despite having a black president for 8 years in very recent history. Yet curtailing the rights of women or LGBT communities or minorities or anyone else for that matter is a deep matter of cultural identity for some Americans, as ugly as that sounds. And while some will frame it as states' rights, giving the state the ability to impose restrictions on individuals is an act of taking rights away, forcing women into essentially a legal contract to give birth. Is the sort of thing that even most authoritarian governments feel is a bit much. But maybe these laws, however misguided, are in some way out of a love of children. Consider then how states spend tax revenue on parentless children now. California, which is definitely not going to outlaw reproductive rights, spends 3 times as much on children living in foster care than Texas, which definitely has outlawed reproductive rights. New York State spends more than Texas as well, despite having only half of the population. Oregon spends twice what South Carolina spends on foster youth. Washington spends 3 times what Mississippi spends, despite only having twice the population. Maryland spends 3 times what Arkansas spends, despite having half the population. States that already have the greatest restrictions on reproductive rights consistently underfund foster care systems. Also, those happen to be the states with the highest rates of incarceration. Again and again, everywhere you look, the commitment to actual outcomes is missing. The actual outcomes of criminalizing reproductive choice will be an increase in youth at greater risk for incarceration. Incarceration that could find these children performing unpaid prison labor in states where that's legal. States like Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas. But keep in mind, These are, again, the states that voted for slavery when they had the chance, which doesn't seem so unfair to mention now. So maybe they are committed to an outcome for children by suppressing the reproductive rights of women, but it isn't one anyone should be in favor of. The only thing we should be in favor of is more This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We have a whole week of science to get to tonight. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
Think we can do it? All the
Yeah.
science? Yeah, there's quite a bit. And thanks for that great disclaimer, Justin. It's a thing that is on our minds this week.
It's been a strange week.
This very strange week, yeah. On this
and whatever
week's
whatever
show,
your opinion is on it, I don't care. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Nobody should
All right.
care what anybody's opinion is on it.
But you know what? We're not
None of
talking
that business.
opinion here. We're talking science. And so let's just
Exactly.
dive into what we've got for the show. And I have stories about brain resets, sweet CO2, and black hole sound.
Mm.
What you found?
I've
Justin?
got Dr. Justin's poo pills,
Mhm.
raising stakes on global warming, what veggies are doing to our kids, and where have all the fish gone?
That sounds like a song, or it should be. Oh, where have the fish gone? I don't know.
What have the vegetables done to your kids?
Blair, what's in
One
the
song.
animal corner?
So I have daytime bats and I have sleep deprived birds. So all sorts of weird stuff happening.
That's
in the animal
also, you
corner.
see, you could songify that too.
Can you? Are you ready?
Daytime bats. What was the bird one again?
Sleep
deprived
cat.
birds.
Sleep
No,
deprived
not cat.
bird.
Gotta get. I
As
gotta
long as
get
you
that.
do a sing-songy voice, I guess anything becomes the song almost instantly.
We can make it work. We can. Oh my goodness. But as we jump in here, my first story is not songs that we'll be singing, but maybe that will be music to our ears. We're jumping into the show. If you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure that you look for us on your favorite podcast platform. We are This Week in Science. You can also find us live streaming our broadcast of our podcast on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays. Right here, right now is what we're doing. And we are TWIS Science on Twitch and Instagram, everywhere else. Like I said, This Week in Science. You can find a whole bunch of information also at our website, twis.org. Okay, let's get into the sounds of science. Black hole sounds of science. Researchers are looking for reverberations from black holes in outer space. Like the banging of a gong, like the ripples on a pond. Ripple, 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 ripple.
Is it gravity waves they're looking for? Is it
No, not it is reverberations of X-rays that have been burst from the black holes released when infalling matter is pulled into the black hole, and the energy it occurs as X-rays, these very high energy X-rays. And so MIT astronomers and others are looking for these echoes of X-ray bursts from binary black holes. And now these are systems that have a star that's orbiting and occasionally being eaten by a black hole. And when they're being eaten, especially, then you have all that, the gas and the dust and other stuff from that star and that star's little solar system being pulled into the black hole as well. And so you get more X-rays and more energy signatures. So they've just published their study in Astrophysical Journal, and they've coined a term which I think is going to stick. It's the reverberation machine. And they've used this algorithmic automated search tool to look through satellite data for signs of these X-ray echoes bouncing off of objects in the local space around black holes. And when they compare the echoes from different satellites across different systems, they're able to get kind of an idea of how a black hole evolves during an outburst. And so when an outburst occurs, it first has a hard state where there's a whip of a corona of high energy photons and a jet of relativistic particles, and it's speed of light, launch, woo, there it goes. And then after that point, there's a final energy burst that occurs, and then it transitions to a soft or low energy state where it's just kind of hanging out. And so they can understanding how these bursts of energy occur and how they happen. They've been able to identify 8 more black hole binary systems that they hadn't seen previously. They used data taken by NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer. It has a very nice acronym. NICER. It's the nicer way to look at black holes, which is a high time resolution X-ray telescope that's on the International Space Station. Originally, it had looked at 26 different black hole X-ray binary systems, and then they found 8 out of that were not known to emit these echoes that they were looking for. And so they are able now to be able to check out these echoes and listen to the sounds of the black holes and get an idea of what stars are around the black holes, what objects are around those stars, because it's like a bat's echolocation. They're able to take advantage of all of these X-rays reverberating, bouncing off of things. And because they're using different satellites to kind of triangulate the different signals, they can really get a picture of what's there and start taking a look at the space around black holes, which is pretty fun stuff. Now, I keep talking about the sounds of black holes, and so you're probably like, "What do you mean the sounds of black holes?" Yes, so
Hey, so the Outer Limits was right.
I was gonna say
That's the
it sounds
sound
like
of space.
that sounds like the beginning of a Flash Gordon episode or something.
it does sound like
That's
that.
some old school golden age
Yeah.
of radio sci-fi sound right there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that is one black hole, and apparently NASA is releasing a whole bunch of black hole recordings currently because it's in honor of Black Hole Week that's coming up. But they have recordings of the Perseus galaxy cluster, and they've sonified the black hole at the center of this galaxy cluster. And this one sounds a little bit different than the black hole we just heard. I think the Perseus has ghosts.
Very much the stranger knows.
And so this is this is like a radar-like scan, and these are the waves emitted in different directions, and this is the X-ray data collected by Chandra. In addition, they have another black hole, the black hole at the center of Messier 87, M87. This was The first release from the Event Horizon Telescope. This is not Event Horizon Telescope data, but this is a number of different X-rays from Chandra, the optical light from NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, and radio waves from the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile. And this one, I think, this one is my favorite.
Oh, wait.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was some deep sleep
That was
meditation
peace.
sounds.
Yeah,
Wasn't that
Put
great?
that
that's
on
what
a
you
loop.
hear in the background when you get a deep tissue massage.
I can't wait to see what people do with these sounds because obviously, this is going to be publicly available because it's all NASA data that's being released. But this is these were led by the Chandra X-ray Center and included as part of NASA's Universe of Learning program with support from the NASA's Hubble Space Telescope Goddard Space Flight Center. But they've got a whole bunch of things that they're going to be looking at and sonifying. And it's so neat that we can take the energy of the universe and make it something that is tangible to us. I don't know. Speaking of like where I'd want to go if I were to visit a black hole, I'd probably be heading for Messier right about now. But I don't know about you, about me. Justin, do you want to move on to from I don't know, space to poop hills because that makes sense.
Yeah. So when Ponce de Leon went searching for the fountain of youth, he may have been looking in the wrong places because he didn't know about Dr. Justin's, not a real doctor, poop pills, not necessarily in pill form, cure for what ails you. This is scientists at the Quadram Institute in the University of East Anglia have found that transplanting fecal microbiota from young into old mice can reverse hallmarks of aging in the eyes, the gut, and the brain. So they also tried it the other way around, found that microbes from aged mice induced inflammation in the brain of young recipients and depleted a key protein required for normal vision. These findings show that gut microbes do play a role in regulating some of the detrimental effects associated with aging, and kind of opens up the possibility of finding gut microbe-based therapies for decline later in life. Longtime listeners of the show are aware that gut microbiota have positive effects. Most diseases are at least associated with changes in the types of behavior of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes in the gut. There's always a question: is it because of, we've talked about it a little bit? Is it the medications that you end up on later in life, perhaps, that have this influence? Is it the disease itself that's causing it? Is it causing the disease? There's definitely the association there. Some changes in microbiota composition just happen naturally as we age, negatively affecting metabolism, immunity, inflammatory bowel diseases, cardiovascular, autoimmune, metabolic, and even neurodegenerative disorders. So a lot of stuff is involved here. This study, published in the journal Microbiome, found that the microbiota from old donors led to loss of integrity. So this is taking the old mice fecal microbiota, putting it into the young mice. They found that it led to a loss of integrity of the lining of the gut, allowing bacterial products to then cross that gut blood barrier and enter circulation, which results in triggering the immune system and inflammation as far away as in the eyes and the brains of these mice.
It's all connected.
Yeah, and the
Once
eyes
you start breaking down the linings, just it all goes.
It's all, yeah, and this is, yeah, like I still have like lots of questions about like this. Like, why is the microbiota of the old mice? Like, are they just is it a mutation that's taking place? But then when's the starting point of a microbiota when you're talking about the time frame that it's existed in the gut? Is that what's going on? In the eye, the team found specific proteins associated with retinal degeneration elevated in those young mice receiving the old donor mice. In old mice, these detrimental changes that were already there in the gut, the eye, the brain, they actually reversed by transplanting gut microbiota from the young mice. Which again, you're talking about then a causal effect of the microbiota to these ailments. But what is causing that? Anyway, that's the ongoing part of the study. They're now working to understand how also these how long these positive effects of the transplants will last, trying to identify the beneficial components of the young donor microbiota and how and why they impact organs so distant from the gut. Although I think they already have a clue with that, with the gut blood barrier being leaky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Researchers
I
do
wonder, we know
caution.
that,
Oh,
what?
sorry.
Oh, I was just
Oh,
gonna say, I know that with the blood transplants, where they take the old blood and put it in the young mice, or the young blood and put it in the old mice, the same kinds of things happen. They see the same changes.
right.
So is it metabolic? Is it just a component that maintains the microbiota? Is it the interaction? Like, there's got to be something similar in the crossover happening here.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask too is, if they do isolate what they think are the beneficial bacteria in this poop, what I was not laughing because of the word poop. I was laughing because I oversimplified things so much. But anyway, if they find out what the beneficial bacteria is, I'm very curious if transplanting just that bacteria will have the same positive effect in the same way because of what you're talking about, Kiki. Like, is there something in the special sauce of this that we have not yet figured out? And can you extract, or do you really just need to take the full gut sample and throw it in there for it to have the full effect?
Do we just need to consume our children? No.
Oh gosh. So I think it's going to be, I think it sounds like it's going to be a little bit of what Kiki said in the latter version of what you were suggesting there, Blair, because in this case, they actually had somewhat enhanced the fecal transplants with what they considered to be beneficial bacteria from healthy mice, because they wanted to make sure that they had healthy mouse bacterial samples in each. So there was a little of a probiotic involved in both transfers, meaning something other than just the microbes present that are a factor in this. There's some other ingredient to this mix. And like you said, Kiki, when talking about the blood reversing aging aspects when they did those transfers in the past, now that we're talking about a leaky gut allowing these things to pass through, maybe it's just things that aren't there in the blood of the younger mice that could be the contributing factor. The amazing thing is they keep getting this effect, whether it's a fecal transplant or a blood transfusion.
So how do we keep the lumen, the epithelia healthy? This is how do we keep those barriers from breaking down? Because I feel like that's going to be the big direction. How do you keep in the brain, in the blood vessels, in the gut? How do you keep the barrier from breaking?
And do you want to? Because we've also had studies.
Yes, no, you do. You want it to be controlled because homeostasis is important to the management of a proper physiology. That's homeostasis. It's essential.
I want modern medicine to hurry up and figure this out, because I feel like
I'm not getting
with
any
all
younger.
with all the money that we throw towards cancer research and all the money that we throw towards brain research and all the money that we kind of throw towards these very specific ailments,
Mhm.
the more we learn about the gut, the more the gut is related to all of it. And it would just be so great if you could just go, you know what? People with healthy guts are healthier. So maybe it's time for us, when you're young and healthy, to do a panel to figure out what kind of microbiota you have going on in there, and then check it when you get sick. I would just love that. It's just
Yeah.
crazy to me that this
That we
is not
don't
part
yet.
of
Yeah.
standard modern medicine yet. How many times do we have to learn this lesson before it becomes integrated and it gets the money and the backing that it needs to be part of that?
Well, it needs to be able to be part of the pharmaco-medical industrial complex,
Yes.
right? Before
Yes.
before it becomes a part of everything. Yeah.
Until then,
I
though,
just-
it's technically a supplement. So that's
Yeah.
why Dr. Justin's not a real doctor. Poo pills are still on the market. Not necessarily
I
in pill
just
form.
want like that when you have even just the
I
stomach, if you
want-
just want to focus just on the stomach, even though we know it's wider than that. When you have stomach problems, what do? They test you for viruses and very specific bacteria, but they don't test the levels of beneficial bacteria from a baseline. It's very frustrating.
Yep.
Well, so yeah, so there's some baselines, yeah, because they've associated specific bacteria with things like irritable bowel syndrome. So they have a correlation
Yes.
there for some of those negatives. But yeah, knowing what the right makeup is, and then we're like, this is the whole other layer we're gonna have to figure out: is there gene interplay to the point that your beneficial bacteria and my beneficial bacteria are going to have a slightly different mix based on how they're interacting.
Which
You're
is
right.
why
Yeah,
you need a baseline.
we need a baseline, and we need a lot more research.
We need a baseline and we need it now.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready for I'm practicing my
Good.
Yeah.
microbial activism.
Right.
All right, Blair.
Yes. Speaking of activism.
Speaking of activism, yes.
So related to the disclaimer today, I wanted to bring an actual peer-reviewed article from University of California, San Francisco, looking at OBGYN residence programs. So for those who are not acronym familiar, if they don't see their OBGYN every 6 to 12 months, that's a doctor that deals with the female reproductive system. And so the problem is, I didn't know this, but the residency programs, it makes perfect sense once you hear about it. Depending where you do your residency as an OBGYN, you may get taught different things, especially in the light of the strike down of Roe v. Wade. In fact, this study, this research found that 128 of the 286 residency programs in the United States are likely to ban the teaching of abortion because the state will not allow abortion. Therefore, the residents can't watch abortion happen and be trained on how to do it or how to coach someone through that. And so that's about 44% of the residency programs that they looked at. And 2,638 of the 6,007 residents who were in accredited programs across the country were in programs in states that are certain or likely to ban abortion. So that's 43.9%. So the same numbers, basically. So that means about half of residency programs will not be teaching abortion once this goes away. In 2020, 92% of obstetrics and gynecology residents reported having access to abortion training. So this would plummet to close to 50%. And so the problem is, sure, if you train in Texas and you live in Texas and you practice in Texas for your whole life and abortion, it continues to be illegal for your entire career, okay. But the problem is doctors move and policies change. And so this doesn't just affect the individuals who can't get abortions right now, it will actually affect access to abortions for years because it will affect who is trained on this practice. The other problem is that learning abortion training as a resident also teaches bedside manner, counseling, trauma-informed care, miscarriage management, and uterine evacuation. All of those skills come through abortion training in most cases because abortions happen. They are scheduled. You can watch it. It happens as a resident, right? And so it is a training opportunity to learn these very valuable skills that you might not otherwise get. And one of the first author, Kavita Vinekar, MD, assistant clinical professor of obstetrics and gynecology in the UCLA School of Medicine, she says, those are the skills I got in my abortion training that I use every single day in all of the non-abortion care that I do. So researchers are very concerned about this. They suggest at the very least in this new world we are moving into that whenever possible, there should be out-of-state travel rotations in residencies so that clinical students, so that the educators running those residency programs kind of force those students to have those out-of-state experiences so that they are better trained for no matter where they go to practice. They also suggest abortion simulation curriculum for all residents, regardless of where they intend to practice and where they are going to school. So I bring this up just as a reminder. I already kind of said it, but there are farther reaching results of this beyond just limiting current immediate access to abortion care. And this, we could feel it for years or decades, potentially. So this is a big deal. This is bad. This is bad for health. And without getting too intense on it, I will say there are things all of us can do. Google it. But this is a real problem for public health.
Yeah, and I think that is it on, in the face of the politics, it's being sold as this political dividing issue, but really it is a public health issue. I had added a separate story that was also published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences this week on the U.S. foreign aid restrictions and maternal and children's health evidence from the Mexico City policy, in which the funding that goes to groups that support abortion services or family planning services outside of the United States often have that funding removed when the GOP comes into office and then reinstated when Democrats come into office. And in this particular instance, they're looking at the Mexico City policy, which restricts U.S. funding for abortion-related activities worldwide. Since its enactment in 1985, this has kind of been the back and forth aspect of it. And they estimate that reinstating the Mexico City policy so when the Democrats came back into office and gave them funding back, they estimate that between 2017 and 2021, it resulted in approximately 108,000 maternal and child deaths and 360,000 new HIV infections because of the lack of information on and support for reproductive health. And so this higher maternal and child mortality rates and HIV rates will be higher worldwide. Not just, it's public health around the world. It's when you talk about abortion, it's health, it's family planning, it's other services, and as a result, we're facing it here in the United States, but there are other things we might, if people aren't getting the education they need, it could lead to the resurgence of many diseases that maybe have been.
Yeah, this whole thing doesn't sound very pro-life to me, but that's fine. I'll just
it's anti-reproductive rights, and that swing back and forth that you're talking about, depending on who the administration is, translates out to human rights in general has
Yeah.
been a pattern between the two parties that vie for control of the U.S. government, some with electoral and some with popular vote. Yeah, I had a bunch of stories that I thought about bringing on this issue, but none of the ones that I found were from this week. So that I didn't bring them because that would be unprecedented for our show.
I see what you did
This
there.
is this the stories
Out
we've
of
brought
the way.
now are precedented. Much precedence.
Mhm.
Much very precedence. Okay. Moving from this issue that we are very focused on this week, generally, let's move on to another that seems to keep our attention fairly regularly. You want to talk about fish, Justin?
Oh, yeah. So this is greenhouse gases emissions are continuing to warm the world's oceans, as we've been talking about on this show for 15, 20 years, or however long we've been talking about it. Marine biodiversity, it seems, could plummet, according to this research, to levels not seen since the extinction of the dinosaurs. That's according to the recent study in the journal Science by Princeton University researchers. Paper's authors modeled future marine biodiversity under different projected climate scenarios. They found that if emissions are not curbed, species loss from warming and oxygen depletion alone could mirror the impacts of humans, the effect we've had on marine biodiversity over hundreds of years of fishing by the year 2100. So the impact humans have had by overfishing matched over the rest of this century.
Aren't we amazing? We're so fast.
Yeah.
We do things right when we do it. Sorry.
Yeah, this is senior author Curtis Deutsch, professor of geosciences at the High Meadows Environmental Institute at Princeton. Aggressive and rapid reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are critical for avoiding a major extinction of ocean species. Study found that reversing greenhouse gas emissions could reduce the risk of extinction by 70%, meaning we're already 30% of it's just not, there's no avoiding at this point.
Well, we've already done a bunch. And extinct is forever, so.
Yeah. So part of what there's, I'm going to kind of summarize here. Part of the things that they are talking about is higher rates of extinction in the polar regions, because those fish are used to those waters. Key thing here sort of being colder waters are higher in oxygen. So fish in the already cold waters are used to having more oxygen available to them. So they're just only going to experience oxygen depletion. There's nowhere else for them to go that's not even warmer. Tropical fish are going to experience biodiversity loss, but many of those fish will actually be able to move, because as temperatures warm elsewhere, it'll more closely match where they were in the tropics. The equator itself could just end up being a dead zone because it's already a very low oxygen environment.
Mhm.
One of these trade-offs too is, as water temperatures warm, it increases the metabolic rate of fish. Increased metabolic rates require more oxygen. So there's almost a limiting factor on where fish can live just from that scenario.
Right. Yeah, so there's a lot, because they're metabolically, if they're in the oceans, there's certain amounts of pH they can deal with. There's oxygen that they need in certain depths of water. There's also going to be saltiness that they require. There's also, all those factors feed together.
The problem is, though, fish can move, but a lot of times the parts of their environment that they depend on cannot. So
Yes.
So that's the problem with the tropical fish, is they might be able to move, but if the corals don't move with them, like you were saying, it's already a low oxygen environment. It's also a low nutrient environment. So they depend on corals and and stuff to kind of help with that. So,
which in a rather slow paced transition, everything you would kind of assume would move together to some degree or another, and fish can to some extent adapt. Some, others won't, and that's how you end up with these that get left out of the ability to adapt or ability to find the food or the ability to maintain that high metabolism on lower oxygen. So anyway, all the fish are going to die.
Oh no.
Some.
No,
Most.
some.
Well,
lot.
okay. Yeah,
lot.
not all of the fish, right? But this is they've compared their model to it tracks what took place at the last really big extinction event. This is the end Permian extinction, and the distribution of species that we are seeing are following the similar pattern to that massive extinction event. So,
Yep.
just not good.
Yeah. Well, we're doing a good job of that worldwide, I think.
We are.
Making our mark in the fossil record.
We are making our mark. We're not in the best way. And if we destroy the fish stocks, we're destroying a major source of protein for humanity. We've relied on fish for eons. Additionally, it's destroying an ecosystem that is, productive, that then supports other life and other life on land. So you kill what's in the water, you kill what's on the land, and none of that is any good. What can we do? What can we do? I don't know. I don't know. Well, here's some potentially good news for the corals. Researchers have just been mapping corals around Hawaii, and they've published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Researchers from Arizona State University Global Futures Laboratory, they have been looking with their Center for Global Discovery in Conservation Science with a tool called the Global Airborne Observatory, GAO. And with the GAO observatory mapping, they were able to look at how coral in different areas, or in 10 different areas around Hawaii, responded to the 2019 mass bleaching event. And they discovered that there were winners and losers of the mass bleaching event. And do you want to take any kind of a guess as to what led to winners versus losers?
Coloration.
Coloration?
Yeah,
No.
like if you're like an ivory colored fish, and suddenly
Nope.
you're
Not
hiding better.
coloration. Not coloration.
Shape.
Nope. Nothing to do with shape. It had to do with how close they were to people along the shoreline.
Ha.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah. So as part of the Hawaii's conservation efforts, they're trying to create 30 areas or preserve 30% of their land and water areas and 30% of their ecosystems. And in doing that, this information will let them know the best places to really preserve corals and different populations that could potentially make it through the ever-increasing oceanic temperatures. So the next time there's a bleaching event, the corals that are near shore, where all the sunblock and the waste runoff and all of the other pollutants that come from streets and our use of vehicles and just even air pollution that gets down in there, all that stuff that makes life harder for those corals. When they bleach, they're going to just have a harder time rebounding. And so that's maybe not, even though it's closer to people and tourism, perhaps not the best area to protect, because the corals that are further away from people do better. Who knew?
Aside from maybe raccoons, I think that's true for all species on the planet.
Cockroaches Cockroaches like us.
Oh,
There's lots of species that like us. My crows like me.
Yeah, crows, vultures,
Squirrels,
squirrels,
rats.
pigeons.
Oh, California condors. That's not,
Uh-huh.
it wasn't a story that I added, but there were more California condors released into the wild in Northern California this week. So a little bit of good news out
See,
there.
it's not
in the
impossible.
world.
We can fix things.
Yes.
It is possible.
We can raise birds in a zoo and then let them go.
Yeah,
and
but
hope they
also,
don't
like,
die from DDT poisoning.
prevent people from using lead ammunition and different poisons and DDT and all that. Yeah. So it's the captive
lead
breeding, but there's
gas.
also
Lead
there's
gas.
policy.
For years, we were just burning and putting lead into the environment. Like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are putting all sorts of carbon dioxide into the environment, and that's the big deal, right? Carbon dioxide. Well,
It's a heat-trapping gas.
researchers in China, though, have come up with a new method, which kind of involves old methods. It's an electrical bio fermentation product. And so what they're doing is they're using yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and electrolysis to break up carbon dioxide and turn it into sugar, glucose, long chain fatty acids that can be used for other purposes. And with this methodology that they have come up with, it could be possible for manufacturing plants that have carbon dioxide coming out of their wazoos to be able to capture some of that carbon dioxide and turn it into other useful products. Could you imagine, though? Maybe we're not clearing as much forest for sugarcane because the local plant down the street that was doing something else is now making the glucose that the sugarcane factory was doing.
I'm still trying to get my head around yeast making sugars.
Yes, yeast making sugar. It's like backwards, right?
Yeah.
Usually they eat the sugar.
Convert it into to alcohol.
All right.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting process that they are using. They have a bioreactor. They've got feedstock. They've got carbon dioxide, and there's products, glucose, long chain fatty acids that can be used for all sorts of things. Our soaps, those are long chain fatty acids. All sorts of things. So new process.
Soap. Great.
New soap. It comes from the air. Wash yourself with the air. Pour some air on your cereal. Okay, anyway, I'm taking it too far. But I'm excited by the possibilities of this new process and hope to see it go someplace. Somebody use it, please.
So is the idea from this, one quick question, is the idea from this to catch CO2 as it exits a factory, or is it to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere that currently is up there?
It could be either. So here what they're doing is it's specifically recycling of carbon dioxide. So it's a carbon dioxide source that goes into their bioreactor and the whole system. But if you had a carbon capture system that's taking carbon dioxide from the air and isolating it, there's no reason why you couldn't just be making sugar from the sky.
Yeah. So, because that's somebody
Probably
in our
very energy intensive, though.
so somebody in our YouTube chat room or YouTube comments said, that's not a fix. That's just dealing with the symptom, not the cause or whatever. But so yes, we
Not
need to
necessarily.
stop CO2. However, one of the reasons CO2 is so bad, especially compared to methane, is that its latency is on the hundreds to thousands of years in the atmosphere. So even if we completely stopped using CO2 right now, there's still a lot in the atmosphere, and it's going to stay there for a long time unless we get creative with how to pull it out. Exactly. Yeah.
And people love sugar. We love sugar and fat.
Yeah.
Let's take it from the air, from the sky. This is This Week in Science. Thank you for joining us for another episode. If you are enjoying the show, please head over to TWIS.org and consider clicking that Patreon button. Patreon is where our listeners, you, support the show. Anyone who supports us at $10 or more per month is thanked by name at the end of the show. And there's lots of other fun goodies that come in the mail as well. Thank you for your support. We really can't do this without you. Okay, I'm gonna come on back. We don't want to talk about COVID right now, do we?
I mean, it's happening.
It's still happening.
I don't have
People
anything
don't
new.
care.
Yeah, nothing new.
All right. So what we're gonna do instead is go straight to Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my gosh, I have all sorts to do with nighttime and sleeping. So first, I want to talk about magpies.
Ooh.
I love magpies.
They're so fun. They make the coolest sounds. They're so
do.
smart. This is a study on Australian magpies, Cracticus tibicin. Sure, yeah, that.
Yeah.
This comes from La Trobe University in Melbourne, and they wanted to see basically what would happen if they messed with magpies' sleep. So they wanted to see what happened with their singing if they gave them a bad night's sleep, but also specifically they wanted to see some of their problem solving and thinking processes and how they were impacted by sleep. I know if I get a bad night's sleep, my brain just slowly gets worse and worse throughout the day until I can't even form complete sentences if I don't get my sleep. So we know that humans and mammals in general have this non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sections of sleep, and we need it for our brain to work right. And when we are denied those things go to pop pretty quickly. So this is the first study, as far as these researchers know, and as far as I know, looking at birds and sleep loss and how it would impact the brain in similar ways to how it impacts mammals. They picked magpies because they're smart, because they have a very cool song that is kind of varied and has very specific purposes to their survival. And they're also known for their social nature, their cognitive abilities, complex vocal behaviors, all that good stuff that I basically already said. I guess I'm sleep deprived currently. But
Keep going, Blair. You can do this.
I got it. So then they investigated how sleep deprivation over a full night of 12 hours or a half night, 6 hours, affected the cognitive performance in these magpies. Prior to each treatment, they were trained on an associative learning task, just kind of like really simplified. The blue cube, you get a treat. The yellow ball, you do not get a treat. You have to learn to associate the blue cube with a treat. That's an associative learning task. If I pick that one, I get my treat. Then on the day after experimental treatment, where they basically kept them from sleeping, the birds were tested on a reversal learning task. To look this up, because this was a term that I was not super familiar with in an experimental setting. Kiki probably knows all about it. But a reversal learning task is basically to follow my example of the blue cube and the yellow ball. If you taught that magpie to pick the blue cube and he gets a treat, then suddenly on the next day, he has to pick the yellow ball to get the treat. And the question is, how long does it take this magpie to figure out that the rules have changed? So,
it takes a person a long time to figure out that the goalposts have moved. So,
yes.
I mean,
because there's a sense of, no, this was right yesterday.
This is how I get it yesterday. Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, are we talking politics again?
I didn't think so. I thought we were talking about magpies. And
Behavior.
okay.
We're
Never
talking
mind.
about magpies and behavior. There
Yes,
we
yes,
go.
yes. So okay, so they tested them on this reverse learning task. They changed the rules, and so this was a good way to glean whether sleep loss affected kind of the way their cognitive processes were working. They indeed, when sleep deprived, showed slower responses to reversal learning tasks. They were less likely to perform and complete the task, and those that did far worse than better rested birds. So some of them didn't even finish. They just gave up. Poor things, so tired. So the idea is to measure how quickly and successfully animals can adapt to changes of reinforcement contingencies, which obviously is an important survival technique. If you can't adjust to changing needs and stressors and signals to food in your environment, you will die. Very plain and simple. So they need to be able to have that kind of mental plasticity to adjust to changing rules in their environment in order to survive. So if they are sleep deprived and they have trouble with that, that is a big problem. The other thing they found out is that they recorded their songs for 3 days leading up to and then after this.
Were they slurring
sleep
their
deprivation.
words?
Kind of. They sang longer, yet fewer songs. They shifted singing from twilight to midday. They just wanted to go to bed, get it over with. And during the post-recovery day, their frequency bandwidth narrowed. So yeah, they were basically slurring. They were enunciating their songs less. And so they were specifically, it appeared, choosing physically less demanding songs. Some things like the trills, which are one of my favorite magpie sounds. It almost sounds like a clicking. This is a really important song that they do because it's physically difficult to do. It shows fitness and it receives a stronger response from rivals and mates. So if they're not doing these more complicated songs, that is going to impact their survival as well. So ultimately, what did we learn? Birds, like other animals, sleep's important to them. It optimizes waking performance, and it shows that birds, just like mammals, have the same problems from sleep deprivation. It impairs cognition, it alters communication. I am sure this is not... So good.
Well, that's a very good bird impersonation there, Kiki. You really got the vocalizations down.
Magpies also... Oh, Kiki, you're muted. Magpies also go kind of like... I like that one a lot. There's a Donovan song called The Magpie that has that in a bunch. I really like as well. So everyone can look that up later. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm sure this is not the last we will hear of this. I'm sure most animals that sleep kind of respond to sleep deprivation in one way or another. But this is how we slowly figure it out. You take the kind of more obvious answer of, do birds care if you keep them up? The answer is yes.
Yes, yes, they do.
How, what parts of their behavior is impacted by that. And then the bigger how is what's happening in their body, what's happening in their brain that causes those things to happen. So I think it's a very cool kind of initial toe dip into this world of sleep deprivation in birds. I'm sure it's not the last we're going to hear of it.
Well, I'm also going to say that sleep deprivation, as if the birds are not used to human encroachment in their areas and people are coming in, traffic, construction, things are interrupting them, keeping them awake, lights on all night long, street lights and whatnot. Suddenly you have birds that are sleep deprived. They're not singing well. They're not singing their peak songs, and they're not getting mates. So you're going to affect reproduction. You're going to affect all of it down the road.
Right. And some bird species will be able to adapt quickly, but others it might impact several generations before they
Yes.
get used to it, and then it can have really intense long-lasting effects on their population. For sure.
Dickie in the chat room saying some take issues with people and even take revenge. This happened on like a couple block radius around the Capitol in Sacramento, capital of California. The Capitol building. Somebody must have done something bad to some of the birds around there, because they started dive bombing and attacking people. And it was just in this one, it was like in this one like couple block area, people walking on their way to work or going to lunch or going about their business were getting dive bombed, and the birds were like snatching at their hair and like doing all this terrible. So yeah, they can like, and they've also shown that they can recognize individuals. They did this series of experiments with these big mask people. You know, people wearing these masks that were being mean to the local birds. I think it was COVID or something. I don't know if it was.
They were crows, yeah.
Crows. Thank you. And then yeah, the crows would talk, and the weird thing was, word got around. Somehow they were describing this masked individual, because even crows that hadn't had the initial encounter knew that's the bad guy.
Crows talk.
They talk
do.
to each other.
Mhm.
They're pretty smart.
Yeah.
Don't disrupt their sleep. Yeah, so moving on from sleep deprived birds to bats that have decided to stay awake during the day. I have a story out of Tel Aviv University looking at a very particular group of fruit bats. I was not aware of this. When I first saw this, I was just like, oh, I guess there's a diurnal kind of fruit bat. That's just me, but must be the species in the way that they're. No!
Oh.
In recent years, in Israel, particularly around Tel Aviv, but also in other cities nearby, Egyptian fruit bats have begun roaming around during the day. So my guess is that they have become so habituated to humans and humans dropping fruit or outdoor markets of fruit or some sort of kind of carrot for them, a metaphorical carrot, not an actual carrot, because they like fruits, not veggies. There is a reason that they switched to diurnal. That's my guess. But for whatever reason, these guys know that they're not going to get predated upon. There's food for them to eat, and they are awake during the day. So this was a perfect opportunity for researchers to look at how bats act during the day. Their main question is, how do they get around? Because fruit bats actually have pretty good eyes. Blind as a bat is a myth. So they have pretty good eyes. And so they really can get where they're trying to go by just looking, because it's daytime. It's light out. They don't need echolocation. But photography and audio recordings of the bats have found that they do in fact use echolocation, even though they can see just fine. They did this in 3 different situations. They looked in the morning as bats went out to explore Tel Aviv, later in the day when they visited the sycamore trees, and then at another time during the day when they were drinking water from an artificial pool. Why water from a pool? I will tell you in a second. This is very interesting. But in each of these situations, there was clicking. They used echolocation. So first, the trees. They wanted to see landing and flights between trees. They found that prior to landing, bats increased the sounds they emitted to use the echoes to estimate distance to the ground. So they were definitely using this to aid their depth perception or their landing abilities. They, with the water, this is such a smart research kind of setup. In the water, they had these calls, the echolocation calls, right before coming in contact with the water. And then they reduced it when they were ascending away from the water. So it's different from trees in that it's just this kind of flat obstacle where they have to land. They don't want to land, in a too hard, sink. But they also don't have to worry as much about branches and things like that. So they don't have to echolocate when they're flying away. So the water is this awesome opportunity for them to see if they're adjusting how much echolocating they're doing based on the need at hand. And so what they found was that bats who emerged from the pool didn't echolocate unless researchers put a wall in front of them. And if they did that, then they returned to using echolocation so they knew how far they were from the wall. So this proved to them that there was functional use of echolocation despite the fact that it was the middle of the day. Their hypothesis is that this is due to the fact that echolocation would help them measure distances. It's all about depth perception. It's all about a smooth landing and a smooth takeoff, and that their brains are combining the visual information along with auditory information. The researchers kind of draw a parallel to how when we cross the street, we look both ways, but we also listen for cars or honking or anything.
Right.
And so if you have headphones in, you might make a mistake. You might step out into traffic when you shouldn't, because even though you're using your eyes, we use all of these different senses to kind of gauge our environment. It is part of our perception of our space. And so bats have come to they've grown accustomed to using echolocation as a fundamental part of the way that they navigate their space. And so even if you turn on the lights, they still use it and they still find it useful.
That's really cool. I love the idea that it's a part of their total proprioception, that it's a part of the way that they understand their environment. It's not just sight and hearing, but they're using the echolocation to really give them that extra sense.
Yep.
I think this soul story is terrifying.
Why?
Well, just at the outset, at least, before they realize that these bats have become diurnal, usually the only time you see a bat during the daytime is if they're rabid. And if all of a sudden there's lots
like fruit bats.
Well, you can still get rabies, I would assume. As
Yeah,
a fruit
probably.
Bat.
Less than 1/2% of all bats are capable of contracting rabies.
But those are the ones you
Capable.
would see during the day.
Fascinating. Blair, that's a little
So,
statistic that I
anyway.
hadn't known.
Well,
That's interesting.
Google, I could do some more.
But is that by?
Because I thought I had heard that. I thought bats didn't actually get rabies, so I did.
But
some
there's
Googling.
like thousands of species of bats.
Yeah,
anyway.
and
There's
and
like
most
so
of
many.
them cannot contract rabies.
But are they the most populous ones? They're not the ones, at least in my hometown, because those ones definitely got rabies. And if you saw one during the day, you had to like call the fire department or somebody. I don't know who you were supposed to call. It was like trouble, and like it would be in the newspaper. Second bat found during daylight hours. Are your children at risk?
Well, not from these fruit bats, most likely, but these fruit. It's fascinating to know that the adaptation of echolocation is something that, even though they've made it into daylight and use vision, they have big eyes. They're using vision, obviously, but they're still taking advantage of that. They could close their eyes and fly with their eyes shut if they needed to. And I'm sure they do that when they've got like the baby bat that is hanging on them, and
They're
they're
like
trying to
covering
fly
their
and
eye.
cover.
Get off, Mom! I'm trying to find you some fruit. Get off.
Evan, rude. Thanks for that, Blair.
Yeah.
This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of TWIS. Hey, Justin, you want to talk about? Oh, you're going to talk about dinner. Blair's talking about sleep. You're talking about dinner.
From fruit bats to fruit humans, researchers at St. Michael's Hospital of Unity Health, Toronto, published a study in the journal Pediatrics that looked at growth rates in about 9,000 children. It found that those who eat a vegetarian diet had similar measures of growth and nutrition compared to children whose diets contain meat. Also found that children with a vegetarian diet had higher odds of being underweight, emphasizing the need for special care when planning the diets of vegetarian kids. Although, to be fair, this is a study from Canada. So being underweight in the land of maple syrup-soaked bacon and cheesy fries smothered in gravy might just be normal. According to Jonathan McGuire, Dr. Jonathan McGuire, lead author of the study, over the last 20 years, we've seen growing popularity of plant-based diets in the changing food environment with more access to plant-based alternatives. However, we have not seen research into the nutritional outcomes of children following vegetarian diets in Canada. I guess vegetables just got to Canada. It's a new thing.
You're just using this as an opportunity to make fun of Canada because we just don't get too often enough. I mean, they're just sitting
I
up
just think
there
it's
being
like, what
better than us.
if we fed kids vegetables? What would happen?
Listen, you're an American. You're one to talk.
America is
Ketchup was a vegetable here for a while.
I come from ag land in the biggest agriculture state in the union, which even sends food out to other countries. I think we sell California sells rice to China and Japan.
Well, I'm just saying the country as a whole. If you're painting with broad brushes, like for all of Canada,
I can't travel anywhere as a Californian and find a thing that looks like what I identify as a tomato. Okay.
Hothouses, greenhouses. There are tomatoes in Canada. They get sun. It's not all frozen.
But apparently they've just introduced them in terms of eating. So researchers found children who had a vegetarian diet had similar mean body mass index. They had similar height. Their iron levels and vitamin D levels were fine. Cholesterol levels compared to those who consume meat all fell into line there. So there was really no difference, except they say the vegetarian diet was associated with higher odds of being underweight. Limitation of the study is that researchers did not qualify the quality of vegetarian diets.
Mm-hmm.
So, if somebody's eating nothing but cereal,
right.
I guess they could technically be.
French fries are vegetarian.
Yeah, if you eat French fries
fried in vegetable oil, right?
Yeah, cheese and bread,
and gravy. They put. See, this is the thing I was mentioning.
Gravy's not vegetarian.
It's called poutine, and it's a Canadian thing.
That's very not vegetarian.
No, I know, but they take poutine it's a Canadian dish. They have French fries smothered in cheese, and then they pour gravy over it.
Duck gravy, right?
And they all have to eat it.
So Justin, what were the years of this study? When was this done?
Does that really matter? You're asking me the details?
It does, and I will tell you why.
Okay,
go ahead.
The study was between age 6 months and 8 years. And the years the data was collected was 2008 to 2019.
Right. So I grew up 80s, 90s, not eating meat. The options for me were much less than they are today. And doctors were constantly concerned that I did not have enough iron or protein. And part of the reason is that my parents had to go to a special store a lot of the time to get the fake meat or the soy this. Or the soy milk to make sure that I was getting protein. It was a lot harder. It took a lot more effort to make sure that my diet was balanced.
Right.
And so now there are so many vegetarian options everywhere that you go that they have meat substitutes. There's the number of times I went to a restaurant and had water because they didn't even have a salad that didn't have meat on it. It was like my whole childhood, right? And so I think it's better now potentially than it could have been in the past.
And I think that's the point here, really, is that this study is happening during a time when dietary choices are healthier for people who would like to raise their kids vegetarian, for kids who would like to be vegetarian. And the study is showing that it's healthy, that the kids have good growth rates. They are getting the vitamins and nutrients that they need. They're not deficient. And it's interesting. I think the interesting question is, underweight. Like, is it underweight and not thriving? It doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
And is the underweight really underweight? What is the comparison? Is it
the body mass index in Canada?
Yeah.
Body mass index is
in Canada compared
Nothing.
to
The
other
body mass
Canadians.
index we've talked about it before being kind
It's
of
nothing.
questionable as it is.
It's,
So yeah.
it's not even body mass index. They have a different name
It's
for it because
pseudoscience.
it's Canada. They
not-
can't use the body mass index
Yeah.
because then everybody's obese in Canada.
It's-
But there's,
Not true.
but there may be something better than being a vegetarian soon.
Oh yeah.
What is that? Do tell.
So so this is the intro. Greenhouse gases are raising the stakes for global warming. Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research has done some research into the impacts of climate, specifically those that originate from meat. About a third of greenhouse gases are from food production. Most of that comes from meat production. It's not just the animals themselves. It is the animals themselves, but it's also the production of their feed, the fertilizers that are used there. Deforestation contributes quite a bit to the problem because it's also taking out carbon sequestration when you do that. Part of the solution could be the kind of thing we've sort of been talking about in different ways on the episode. Biotechnology is the thing. Nutritious, protein-rich biomass with meat-like texture produced from microbes, fungi via fermentation. What
Yum.
they are calling microbial protein, what I'm calling bioreactor burgers. Could really be the game changer if adopted. The researchers put microbial proteins into a computer, and it resulted in a terrible mess. So then they ran simulation models instead to plot the environmental effects of the food and agriculture system. They ran it forward to the year 2050, accounting for even future population growths, land uses, food demand, dietary patterns, that sort of thing. According to Florian Humpenoder, lead author of the study,
It's very good.
we found that if we substituted 20% of the ruminant meat per capita by 2050, annual deforestation and CO2 emissions from land use change would be halved compared to a business as usual scenario. The reduced numbers of cattle do not only reduce the pressure on land, but they reduce methane emissions from the ruminant of cattle and nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizing feed or manure management. So while a traditional veggie burger might also show positive results, the fermentation-derived microbial protein fungal patties take agricultural production out of the equation completely. Well, nearly completely, anyhow, because fungi do have a bit of a sweet tooth, requiring some agriculture for sugar production, unless we are making our sugars
from
via
carbon
fermentation.
dioxide. There we go.
They're even better for the environment than we
Turn
now. It's all full circle.
CO2 into meat.
We can do it, people. Fermentation.
People just need to
food.
make those choices, and maybe it's not no meat Monday. Maybe it's fungi Friday, or
it would need to be
microbial Monday, or
according to this, it would need to be like a
50 days.
fungal Friday and maybe a fungal Tuesday or something too. Like about 20% is all they used, and they were able to half the impact, which is pretty amazing.
I think that is the difference in scale, that for just a small amount, a small reduction or a small change, it has such a massive impact. And it just goes back to what we've talked about so many times, which is the huge impact of beef production on carbon dioxide and on climate change and on our environment in general. It's a massive impact.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean, using land to feed an animal to then eat decreases the amount of calories you're getting by a factor of 10. It's trophic levels. That's like the thing that I learned in high school environmental science that just keeps me reaching for the veggie patties over and over and over. It's a huge waste.
Reach for those veggie patties, everyone. Keep reaching for them as long as you can see them. We talked a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week. I get confused sometimes about when we've talked about different stories. We talked about the pupil and having aphasia of the not being able to determine whether or not somebody could imagine visual scenes in their mind's eye based on how their pupil moves. Well, researchers at the University of California, San Diego have gone a step further toward just a more generally applicable and useful smartphone app that could be used to look at people's pupils to determine whether or not they are whether they have or are prone to neurodegenerative diseases, neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, ADHD, and others. So the researchers have developed this smartphone app that uses a near infrared camera, which is built into a lot of newer smartphones. So it's already in smartphones themselves. It's used for facial recognition. So that added to the selfie camera can track where a person's pupil is in the screen, and within the app measure the person's pupillary changes and use those changes to assess cognitive condition. And they have assessed this in comparison to other tests that are used currently within laboratories to determine cognitive condition, and it performed as well as 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 a device called a pupilometer, which is the gold standard for measuring
Sure it
pupil
is.
size. Yeah. The pupilometer. Yeah, so they tested it on how your device and your technology is working well if you can test it on people who are elderly and not really good with technology, and you can get it to work for them. That's what they did. So they gave their smartphones and their app to a bunch of elderly people to try and make it user friendly for older adults, and so that's what they've developed now, is this very simple app interface. And their hope is that they will be able to use this kind of an application with technology that people have in their houses every single, all around them all the time now, to be able to kind of start going into that medical care assessment at home. People who aren't able to go to the doctor or who live in rural areas and are experiencing issues, you can have a test and immediately, or do it while you're talking to your doctor over, over a video conferencing app. Or there's so many implications and applications for this to be accessible, to be able to diagnose people's neural health, which is very exciting. Yeah.
I could see myself just using it over and over all day, just like, am I okay?
What's happening? What is happening now?
But I could also see you could allow permissions. This is where it gets kind of dicey, but you could allow permissions where every time you look at your phone and you use your face to unlock your phone over and over and over, it could be tracking changes in your pupils over time without opening the app, right? So you could use this technology to collect that data longitudinally.
Oh, yeah. And then actually that data could be used to market to people
Well,
who are experiencing
that's
a
the
cognitive
problematic part.
None of that.
Oh.
So, and usually the way these kinds of tests happen is that they measure pupillary changes in response to certain stimuli. So it's not just randomly measuring what your pupil looks like, because your pupil is going to be changing all the time dynamically, or it should be changing dynamically to light levels in your environment, and other things. But they change. Your pupils constrict and expand, dilate based on how excited you are, how relaxed you are. Like, there are all sorts of psychological factors that can influence the way that your pupils move. And so those are the kind, if you're remembering things or not remembering things, if you have anxiety, there are a lot of things that can influence. And so those stimuli that would happen under controlled conditions during the measurement process are very important to be considering as well.
That'd be great to have an app I could open to tell me if I'm having an anxiety attack. It'd be
You
really helpful,
are having an
actually.
anxiety attack. You do not need
Like,
to go to the hospital.
yeah, or like that's why you suddenly are freaking out about the fact that you bought the wrong Post-its. Is because you were having an anxiety attack.
That's right.
Chill out.
Moving on from smartphone apps, and in the sense that maybe you have anxiety and you wish you could get rid of it, would you, if you could, edit using gene editing your brain to change the brain chemistry in your brain, in your amygdala, if it could help you get rid of epigenetic programming that through your life maybe has led you to be more anxious or binge drink or do behaviors that are not good for you.
Wait, binge drinking is a form of anxiety?
No. So binge drinking starting at an
totally-
early age can have long-lasting effects on the brain, and some of that has to do with epigenetic programming. And so there are epigenetic markers that end up in your brain depending on how young you were when you started drinking, how much you were binge drinking, especially has its own specific category of alcohol use. But what it comes down to is researchers at the university, let's see, UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. They've just published in Science Advances that binge drinking in adolescence alters brain chemistry, specifically in the enhancer region of a particular gene called the ARC gene. This is the activity regulated cytoskeleton associated protein immediate early gene. It decreases ARC expression in the amygdala in people and in rodents. And so they went, epigenetic reprogramming is changing this ARC stuff. Oh, let's use rodents and see what happens. So they went in and they showed that they could take CRISPR-Cas9, which is a type of CRISPR-Cas gene editing tool, and they manipulated the epigenome in the rats, histone acetylation, and they were able to change the way that the ARC protein was expressed in rats. And so these rats that they basically made into young binge drinkers who had then anxiety and drinking problems, they changed that for them, and the rats had reductions in their anxiety and a reduction in their preference for alcohol.
Yeah, that's sign me up for less anxiety, please. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, this is so fascinating because it means there's a target. And if you had certain exposure in your life, could it erase some of the behavioral chemical triggers that are in existence in your brain? Would you do that? Right now, it's just rats. So we don't really know
Yeah.
exactly what it does, but it made rats not want to drink and less anxious.
So what is these epigenetic changes then? Is it some tangled bit of the genomic code that is then not expressing proteins? Is it, I mean,
yeah.
that's
So
what
it's
it-
this
so
it's
then
this
you just you're
histone this histone methylation. Yeah.
so yeah, I'm of a certain age. So it's basically like for all those changes, you're taking your Etch-a-Sketch genome and shaking it upside down for a minute to
Yeah, what would that do?
Yeah, I don't know though,
mean,
because
and if you're like, "Oh, I'm 29 and I binge drank when I was 17." That sounds great, but I'm 50 or I'm 75, and is there a difference? Will there be a difference in what happens based on how long, what the impacts will be? I don't know. I find this a very fascinating potential road that we are going down, this idea that with gene editing and targets like this, that these
Yeah.
become options for people to change and reset their brains in certain way. Yeah, shake that
age reversing blood transfusions, age reversing fecal transplants. Like all of it,
Man,
we're
who
going
are
to
you?
Damaging behaviors. Yeah, and what's great is,
a very spry, very wrinkly young man.
Yeah, you're not trying to erase memories that cause something to happen. You're just trying to
Right.
change the way
You
your
react.
brain, your brain kind of urges you to do things or not do things or respond. Yeah.
Yeah, but then
Very
is
cool.
that like it's probably just a cartoon version in my head that you erase all the evidence in your body of all the drugs that you took, all the drinking that you did, all the experiences that you had in the world that affected your DNA, and then you get rid of it all, and then you're just a different person.
Right.
Like,
How different would you
who
be?
wants that? Well, I guess some people.
I thought about that for a
Some people
second,
might.
but I think you're, like I said, you're not erasing things that happened to you in the past. You're not changing how you became the person you are today. You're just less anxious or less alcohol dependent, but otherwise you're the same person.
Yeah. Well, slightly the same person, because you're not going to react in the same way that you used to. But that's not a bad thing if that's the change that you want
Right.
to see in your life. Okay, so my last story isn't so much about changing yourself later after, a lot of experiences have happened. What about genetically modifying children? So at UC San Diego, they have used lab-grown human brain tissue to identify neural abnormalities in a certain syndrome called the Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. And they've published this in Nature Communications. They were able to use gene therapy to recover the gene function in these brain organoids that caused the brain organoids in the dish to malform. So this Pitt-Hopkins syndrome is the result of a mutation. It causes misformation of the nerves as a result of developmental genes not getting turned on in the right way. They went in the brain organoids, gene therapy, they fixed it. They were able to do this in the dish, which means that they could do this embryonically, and they did in mice. They were able to embryonically change where those neurons were going and how the brains of mice developed. But what about genetic interventions for a child that was not caught by genetic sequencing early on, before it was born, right? Who's had this syndrome. The syndrome has developed. They're now a couple of years old. Would this therapy be something that this is a new question also. Gene therapy for children so that they can have a life.
So this is I don't think a controversial issue at all.
Right.
When we talk about all of this gene therapies, gene splicing, all this sort of stuff, it is very easy for most of us to say, I'd be against it, right? Because if you could choose the color of your child's eyes, that sort of nonsense. But there are families that have genetic mutations that predispose a disease that, you can believe it's like, oh, my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, they all died of this thing, or they all had this, whatever it is. There's diseases that run through gene pools. And if you're a member of one of these families and you have a child and you've identified it, of course, knowing what the ramifications are, knowing how the disease progresses, and knowing, when it would be crucial to when not, absolutely you would want to do this. If it's one of these things that's a late stage disease and you can intervene in the 20s, maybe you hold off on it for that. But yeah, all of this is no different than an antibiotic or anything else when you're talking about combating a disease.
Well, if something is clinically tested and, it's gone through all of the appropriate rigmarole to show that it is safe to use, then why not do what science can provide to prevent illness or challenge or any number of things that we would like to make sure is not in the way of our children's lives? Of course we would do it, right? It's just, and I think that's the problem, Justin, you're totally right. this particular kind of medicine is getting compartmentalized and colored in a specific way, but is it really that different from other medical interventions when you get down to it and you look at the processes by which we deem something safe and we figure out how to apply it to humans?
Yeah. And it hasn't been, this hasn't been applied to humans yet. They still have to
No.
do that. The team is optimizing their gene therapy tools that they've licensed. They are preparing. They would like to do a trial in which they are able to do spinal injections of the genetic vector to recover the gene function in the brain, the mutated gene that goes wrong in this particular disorder. The researcher who's in charge says the fact that we can correct this one gene and the entire neural system reestablishes itself, even at a functional level, is just amazing. So the researchers, if it works, it will really, it could really change lives, but there's a long way to go. Long way to go. I don't know. So many interesting questions. Gene therapy. Where is it going? Where will it take us? Humanity. Oh, the humanity. Has it taken us to the end of the show?
It has.
I think it has. Yeah.
I think it did bring us here. Oh my, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. We've made it to the end of the show. We appreciate you being here with us. Time for some shout outs. Thank you, Fada, for all of your help with show notes and show descriptions and social media. Really appreciate that. Gord and Arenlore and all the others who help keep our multiple chat rooms safe and happy places to be. Thank you for being here. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you for the editing and assistance that you are bringing to my life. And of course, as always, thank you to our Patreon sponsors, without whom we would not be able to do this. Thank you to Teresa Smith, James Schofer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazar, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tozzi, Woody MS, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Chefstad, Hal Snyder, Jonathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Maddie Perrin, Gaurav Sharma, Ragan, Don Mundus, Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredis 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Bearden, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Sean and Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hassenflo, Jean Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Rickardley, Remy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, EO, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Summerly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, head over to twis.org and click on that Patreon link. I want you to remember also, not just on next week's show, but this Friday.
Friday.
Yeah, Friday, May 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we will be speaking with Dr. Gregory Forth about Homo floresiensis, the Hobbits of Flores. So don't miss it. It'll be live on our YouTube and Facebook. And wait, what channels? Justin, where do we go?
All of them. We'll be broadcasting on all of the planet's channels Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, as well as 5 a.m. Central European time. There's YouTube, Facebook channel, twis.org/live, all of the channels broadcasting at once.
That's right. Do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe while you watch the season finale of Moonlight for the 10th time with the sound off, you listen to us. Just search for This Week in Science where podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for a newsletter if that's the kind of thing that you're into. No shame.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistmeaning@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be smashed into a veggie patty and will eventually end up as a poo pill.
You can also hit us up on the Twitter where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Ply, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week and also on Friday, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views. But I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand.
Did the music stop?
The music stopped. We're at the end. The after show.
I get to sit.
How weird. Oh, because I turned that down. Duh. Kiki, don't you know how to use your computer? No, I don't. I wanted to blend into this as we get into our after show. It's time for us to talk about how you, Blair, you are the center of your universe. That's right. And that's the end. What do you want? And breathe. We hope that your big toe massage was fabulous. So, how was that science for everyone? Yes, ASMR time.
Oh, have I tried any vegan ice creams? This is an interesting question, and I am happy to talk about it because recently, speaking of microbiome, I wish that I had a baseline of my microbiome, but over the last couple of years, last year or so, I've been having some stomach problems. I've been trying to figure out what the problem is. Nobody can figure it out. I've had all sorts of labs done. Nobody can figure it out, but I have started eliminating dairy in some cases, and that has helped in some ways, but like unclear. Anyway, yes, I've been doing a lot of milk alternatives as a result, and I have found most milk alternative ice cream to be terrible, except for oat milk ice cream has been pretty good.
I like coconut milk ice cream.
Oh yeah, I hate coconut.
Well, okay, that'll do that for you.
So
Okay,
then
fine.
coconut milk ice
Yeah.
cream tastes a little bit like coconut, and I'm like, I can't eat this. I can't do it.
What about there's some flavors of like there's like this really rich soy delicious that's really, really good.
Oh.
Soy delicious, and there's like one kind that's I don't know, it's like
Mm.
an extra rich and I quite enjoy it. I don't like if you don't give me rice milk anything, I will throw it in your face.
Oh yeah.
Almond milk.
Yeah.
Not even
So I've learned some things like oat milk is good in cereal. I love oat milk in cereal. But if you try to cook with oat milk, it makes everything sweet.
Oh, interesting.
So I found that I will either cook with lactose-free milk and just brave it,
That's what I do. Yeah.
or I have cooked with cashew milk, which is kind of savory. So that can be kind of good, but it does provide a kind of a nutty tang to whatever you're doing. So it's tough. There's no replacement for true dairy.
There's not. It's
There's
true.
really not. I have yet to find a vegan cheese I like.
Oh, don't even. I've tried vegan cheeses.
Oh,
It's
no.
gross.
It's
So maybe
don't eat cheese sometimes.
maybe there'll eventually be a gene therapy that can cure you of your lactose intolerance.
That would be great. I don't actually
that's
know
what
if
it
that's
is.
what's wrong with me. It would be great if somebody could look at my microbiome and tell me exactly what's wrong with me. That would be great.
Yeah, you could also just you could knock it out and
Oh yeah,
you
just
know,
drink
just
some
eat
bleach,
yogurt. No, don't drink. What are you talking about? No, an
No, I know,
antibiotic.
you take a heavy dose of antibiotics. I know.
Take it and then eat a bunch of yogurt and see what.
Yeah.
But I think there's a genetic link to this, isn't there?
Certainly.
That's what
I mean,
determines
I've never had a problem with this stuff, and then just all of a sudden, like overnight, I would just be like, I missed work just because of stomach pain.
Things develop over time. And yeah, things
But
change.
that makes it sound like it is microbiota related then.
Yeah.
So much mystery.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
The mystery of the microbiome.
I'm trying to do the math.
R and lore. Oh, is there a chance cooking the lactose-free milk would kill off the lactase enzyme? It doesn't matter because by the time that the milk's gotten to you, the enzyme has pretty much gotten the lactose out of the milk. So there's not lactose in the milk anymore. What's A2 milk? I don't know what A2 milk. What is that?
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
I'm looking it up. Oh, it's a brand. What is the difference between A2 milk and regular milk? Oh, beta casein. Interesting. I have never heard of this. I have never heard of this before. This is fascinating. Okay, thank you for bringing this up. The main difference between regular milk and A2 milk is that regular milk contains both A1 and A2 forms of beta casein, where A2 milk may contain only the A2 beta casein. Some studies suggest that A1 milk might trigger certain diseases. And A2 milk is more beneficial to health. I've never heard of that before.
Gord is being the voice of reason. Problem is not that the bacteria actively does something to you. The problem is that you lack the enzyme necessary to digest it. That's your problem.
That would be if I am lactose intolerant. See, that's the question, though.
Right.
Because still sometimes I'll have dairy and I'll be fine.
Yeah, Eric Knapp is wondering if it could be an allergy of some sort.
I mean, I know it's
so sometimes you have it and it's fine.
Wheat. I know it's not wheat because
garlic.
Gluten actually makes me feel better. Usually, if I eat bread, then it like chills my whole system out. Yeah, I don't know. I've tried a lot of things. It's been about a year. I found a way where 9 times out of 10, I'm totally fine now. I've like figured out foods to avoid, but every once in a while, I'm doubled over in pain and I can't figure out why.
The
wild.
only thing that I can think of food allergy wise for me is red peppers. Red bell peppers. Bell peppers. They immediately cause me to vomit. It's just like,
Youch.
I don't know what's in there, but it's terrible. And I think it's the cheapest form of vegetable, at least.
Carrots.
I think there must be some, like, nobody wants to eat them or something, or they grew too many of them, because this is just because I've flown so much over the last couple of years. Airplane meat thing, I thought, I'll avoid it. But every vegetarian anything on every flight had tons of red bell pepper in it.
Yeah, it always,
edible. Yeah.
Yeah, we want Blair to have a happy tummy.
You know.
Yeah. I know.
It is what it is.
It's a journey.
I've reached the point at which my body starts causing random problems. Started a few years ago. It happens. It's funny. It's like it was pretty much right at I mean, it was I guess it was like between 32 and 35 stuff started happening. Then it's like, "Oh yeah, your body's not young anymore, friend." Yunks.
Wow. Yeah, you're getting up there. Question though.
Yeah.
This is, to me, this is going to get too personal. Never mind.
Start and then back off.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask.
Awesome.
I was gonna ask about. Well, wait a second. When did you meet Brian? And, like, does he have these issues? And because
no, he has a steel stomach.
Yeah, that's what I got. I can, aside from the red bell peppers, which is also just like, once I discovered that, because I thought I just got food poisoning every once in a while, and it was like, oh, some of it, and then it turned out it's always got a red pepper involved. It's always got a red bell pepper involved every time. Other than that, though, yeah, like, I can eat everything, and it's never an issue.
Is Eric Knapp thinks I'm too young to have my warranty expire? Well, so in the olden days, when humans were first a thing, right?
Okay.
I was like practically done. Like, humans lived in between like 40 and 50, right? So like, in the home stretch. But also, it depends what you did in your life. And I did spend several years doing manual labor on concrete in bad shoes. So I feel like that's, that doesn't help. I also, went to concerts without earplugs for like 20 years. So my it's just.
Oh, that's something that we didn't
keep
talk
up
about
with the
this week,
warranty.
isn't it? There's like MIT scientists. Is it MIT? Some researchers are basically curing hearing loss with eardrops.
Oh, wow.
Not all hearing loss, but there's like some new thing. I got to look that up. I totally forgot about it. It was something I tagged and then forgot about. Hearing loss, eardrops. I don't know. It's gone. Oh, here we go. New MIT science. Yes, it was MIT. MIT scientists found a way to reverse hearing loss that may be as easy as LASIK.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is LASIK easy? I feel like that's.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I get that it's common, but it doesn't seem like easy. Like, I don't feel
they
like
peel
it's
back
like,
your eyeball and laser
my home
it.
LASIK kit. Which is gonna go over to the mirror there and perform a little bit of LASIK at home. I feel like that's still
I'm scared of
removing a layer of your eye.
I have terrible eyesight, but I'm so scared of it. I know it's a fine thing that many people do, but I don't want
lots of people do LASIK.
My eye. It scares me.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, so this hearing loss, it's a company, it's spinning out from MIT called Frequency Therapeutics. They've been testing a regenerative therapy that uses small molecules to program progenitor cells. So these are the ones that are in between stem cells and the adult cells. They put them in the inner ear, and those can create the tiny hair cells that our hearing relies on. So they're trying to replace the hair cells that are damaged
That's the business.
in the first
Right.
place.
That's what
The
I've
only
destroyed.
downside is that there's a good chance of developing super hairy ears.
Hey, I'll take it if it can
not
replace
those kinds of
the
hairs.
inner ear hairs
I
that
don't-
I lost from sitting in front of the tuba in band
Womp,
for 10
womp,
years.
womp, womp,
Oh,
womp,
gosh.
womp.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
I was always like, tuba was like here, and the entire trombone section was right here. So it was definitely,
in between the bass drum and the tuba.
yeah, it was not,
Yeah.
not the
Okay,
good
what is this story? So they've dosed more than 200 patients with the therapy so far. They have 3 trials that have shown positive results. One study showed no improvements. They were looking for improvements in speech perception. They've got a clinical trial that they're trying to get started, a 124-person trial, and they'll get results available by early next year. But if those clinical trials go well, then they're saying that they're expecting 10 or 15 years. This would be something we might be able. So just in time for me to have completely lost my hearing, it's gonna be perfect.
good.
We are going to have to keep an eye on this frequency therapeutics and see what they're doing. Stimulating the growth of hair cells in the inner ear. It's not going to fix all kinds of hearing loss, though, because some hearing loss is due to damage of the nerves, the auditory nerves. Some is capillary damage, but the hair cells are the big one. That's the big one.
Mm-hmm. That's what I
Yeah,
heard.
there's also some weird. I don't have. This is too old information, but there was something about rock stars. Despite having played, and this is not the drummer. Drummers go deaf. By the time you're a good drummer, you probably can't hear a conversation properly. But I think this was the singers, at least, in the band. They had great hearing. Like your people like your Mick Jagger, who's played more concerts than anybody else probably in the face of the planet, outside of Bobby Weir. Bobby Weir, I think, has played most live shows. But these big, arena things still have just perfectly fine hearing. Again, though, I guess the speakers are pointed away aside from a monitor. But
yeah, over the last 20 years, in-ear monitors have become quite the thing, and apparently now people are performing on silent stages. So they've got the stacks of speakers that are out away from the stage. And so maybe you've got the drums on the stage, but everybody's got the monitors in their ears. And so there's like nothing except for really light twanging of the electrical guitar strings, that you would hear, because all of it is in the speakers and in the system. So there are these silent stages. And I was talking to a musician who told me that those stages where you have like the VIP crowd down in the very front to like do the special like dancing and oomphing for the band, they're like in front of the big stacks of speakers, so they get like this really quiet experience compared to everybody else. So you don't actually necessarily want to be in that special little upfront VIP area. Yeah. Yeah, but the whole idea of silent stages to me is so fascinating, where it's all just in your monitor and you control the volume of the monitor. And if you have a really good engineer, the engineer has everything totally balanced. So it's not loud and it sounds perfect and you're not hurting your hearing. And you take off your monitors at the end of the show and you're just like, oh, my ears aren't ringing. Everything's fine.
I think I'd probably go to a lot more concerts if they were silent.
Just buy some earplugs.
Yeah, get some good earplugs.
I always
Oh, but
forget
then there's the crowds. That's right. Then there's the crowds.
the
I would
crowds,
want to
the
avoid
sweaty
the crowds.
crowd. What you got
You
to
don't
do
wanna touch
is
them?
you got to go to a
Avoid the
concert
crowds
of
and
a
the
band
noise.
that's like not that new, that's kind of on the older side. And then if the people watching it are over 25, then there's more likely to be a seated section. This is what I've learned. And so then you can sit and then you're not brushing up against other sweaty people as much. See,
There's some.
now it's gotten to the point where I want a seat at a concert.
I want to say this is from a This American Life episode, but there was this this group, like it's sort of like a performance group, that went and found some, small band that was doing little traveling gigs or clubs or whatever, some totally small band, and spent like a week or two learning all of their songs, and then all showed up at one of their venues, was singing along to the show, and all of a sudden they're like, what the band is like freaking out, like, how do these people know all of our songs? And they were like, went and performed being their biggest fans, and showed up with like 30 people who were all singing along in this little bar stage, whatever it was. And I was really like, that is like the most amazing thing, like, to think of doing it. And then like they interviewed the band and they're like, yeah, we were like really blown away. Like we didn't know we had this huge fan base. And then later we kind of found out. It was kind of a letdown, but it was also sort of fun at the time. Yeah, devastating when the truth comes out. But for that one night, they had the crowd singing along with them to all of the songs that they wrote and probably only performed. I had the CD that they sold at the end of the performance, and that's how they got the gas money to the next gig, kind of a thing.
It's awesome. I love good music stories. Good music.
Probably is that a thing? Silent disco?
Mhm.
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
have it's earbuds. And so then I could actually dance at one of these things because nobody else would know what music I'm listening to.
Yes.
So they just assume, oh, he's listening to something else. That's why he's dancing to a
Exactly.
very different rhythm than the one I hear. Okay. Oh, I like that idea.
It's perfect.
I could actually hit the old dance floor that way.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. Everybody's just there dancing, listening to their own music. I mean, you're supposed to be listening to the same music everybody else is, but I mean, you could really just bring your own headphones and listen to like whatever you want and dance.
What was it? The Foo Fighters? What's the guy's name? The Foo Fighter guy? This is the singer. David Grohl?
Yeah,
Is that his
David
name?
Grohl. Good night, Iron Lore.
He described coming up with the not the first, but some of the later Foo Fighter albums, I guess. He started to base the tempo on somebody jumping up and down. Because he said there would be like some songs where the whole crowd would be like jumping up and down to the rhythm. He's like, I'll just do all the songs that way. That's awesome. And
I like that beat. That's great.
Yeah. And so
Got a
they
good beat and
got
they can
everything
dance to
timed
it.
out for just a natural being able to, like, when you jump up in the air and then come back down again. That became sort of the tempo for all the Foo Fighters songs they're on. After, I don't know about all of them, but for his big stadium band performances. If you call it the old dance floor, maybe you shouldn't be hitting it at all. Yeah, it's probably wise. Wise words. Orbital Mechanic 88, very wise words indeed.
Oh my goodness. Blair,
Mm.
you're just leaning back
Wait, what are you
judging
saying?
everyone right
I'm
now.
not any friend of yours? Is that what you're saying? Hey, kid, you can dance if you want to. Then
You can leave your friends behind.
Because your friends don't dance.
And if they don't dance,
Well,
no
they
friend
ain't
of
no
mine.
friend of mine.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
got it.
We got it.
Yep.
We got it.
Mhm.
Ah,
Here, if I lean back, then I have to do this.
there you go. Now you got the steering wheel in your face.
There we go. Here, how about that?
It's good.
So Friday,
Friday. Can you make it?
11 a.m. Pacific time, which would be 8 p.m. the same day here. That sounds like a very doable thing.
Good.
Blairla, will you be joining this?
I don't know. Send me the invite. It depends.
Ah,
I'm working
there's-
from home, so it all
Lack-
depends how my day goes.
Cool.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
I've got a
So-
tab in the rundown for Friday, and I will send you the link invitation on
Great.
Friday.
Great.
Probably about 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes ahead.
Set the
Okay.
Like
alarm
usual.
If I
now.
can't attend, as long as I'm not in a meeting, maybe I'll be in the chat room.
Awesome.
Like if I have a
Yes.
deadline and I have to work on it, I'll put you guys on in the background. But if I'm not in a meeting and I'm not on a harsh deadline, I will come.
All right, I'm setting the alarmy thingy just because, and then I know what's going to happen. Is that I'm going to be.
Because it's out of the normal time.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to go. Why is my alarm going off at this weird time? That's how I
Meeting's
must have
in
set
right
That's
that
now.
why
by
you
accident.
name your alarm.
I must have set. Can you do that?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know how to do things. Stop it. Wait a second. I gotta
Don't
look.
you have a Google or a Siri or a...
No, I just have the. I just use the alarm thingy from the clock on the phone. That's the only thing I'm using.
Okay.
My
I ask Google to set me alarms all the time. Like, hey, you Googly boogly.
I use reminders on my iPhone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I use Post-it notes on the bathroom mirror.
Those work
So I usually
also.
get my big moment of like realizing I was supposed to do something is while washing my hands.
Oh.
I was supposed oh gosh.
At least you don't put the Post-its in the shower because then, like, they...
That wouldn't
Well,
work very well.
What was it? I was supposed to do something. It's
I was
just a
supposed to
soggy mess now.
pick the kid up from school. That was yesterday though. I wonder if yeah, probably.
Your baby's going to school?
College
haven't-
already. I know.
Yeah.
Really? College?
Yeah.
I mean, they
I
move
Starting
fast
in
in
the
Denmark.
fall or
Has been
has been?
going.
Yikers.
Yeah, him I don't really need to pick up though.
No.
He's
He's
driving
picking
me
himself
around.
up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Prep
Wow.
school starts early for sure.
Jeez.
Yeah. Got a
Did you see the what you want a huda haba?
I don't know that for sure that all of my children fit into the same generation. Like I don't
No,
know
they
if they're
don't.
still naming generations anymore. If we're done with that.
No,
But,
you have a cross. You're crossing generations now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because
Your
he's probably
oldest is
Z,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, he's a Z. Yeah.
But what comes after Z? I forget.
What's now?
Yeah.
Is there anything in between? Because then I have that too. I'm just trying to make sure that
Oh, we go back
all
to the
of-
beginning. It's Alpha.
Alpha.
Generation Alpha is from 2010 to 2024.
got two of them.
Generation Z
two
is
of them.
1995 to 2009.
Got two of those too.
Yep.
There you go.
Forest school. What's a forest school?
Oh, it's where the kids go to school in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like I guess it just depends on the time of year. For most of the time, it seems like that would be cold and rainy. Although this has been people like I've heard I don't know how many times now. Oh yeah, this is just a freak spring day in winter. It'll be cold again in the next couple of days. It's been springtime for the whole. It was springtime for the whole second half of winter.
That's nice. It's been winter here in Portland, and then it was spring, and then it was winter, and then it's spring, and then it's winter, and it can't make up its mind. So I guess it's just spring now. But
It was 85 in San Jose today, so it's fully summer there.
I know I've got friends who are like posting pictures of like their first pool days, and I'm like, what is going on? Who gets in a pool right now? It's so cold outside.
Yeah, well, and we went to a cabin over the weekend, and it was 38 there. So I don't know.
RPB says it's an all outdoor school raised
Mhm.
by wolves. So I went to an all outdoor school when I was a kid. Actually, I was the teacher.
This explains a lot.
I was a counselor at outdoor ed camp.
I think I've told this
Justin,
story
raised by
before.
Justin.
And I actually had a pet wolf, a Russian timber wolf. But I think I've told this story a few times, probably. But I had his uncle who had a horse ranch. Well, he didn't have any horses. He was on a caretaking what had been a horse ranch. He was living out there in the hills, the mountains, in Northern California. And by around that time, they had been killing off wild Mustangs in Nevada. Bureau of Land Management was slaughtering these horses. And then the news came out, and it was like everybody was horrified that they were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, yeah, okay, sorry. What we'll do instead is we'll collect them and we'll just give them away to people. We'll relocate them. My uncle signed up for about a half dozen or more of these wild Mustangs and was breaking them, teaching them to started with getting a rope on them and just walking them around in a circle over and over and over again. And then at some point, he'd try to put the saddle on, and they would kick and jump and fight him. Eventually, he'd get that saddle so they would stand still long enough for the saddle to go on. And that's when me and my cousins were allowed to ride them. At that point on, me and my cousin had 3 cousins. We were all city kids, but we'd be up there for the summers. I was 7. I think the oldest was 11. Just to put this in age ranges, we're basically then our jobs were to teach these horses how to be ridden, how to take direction from a human. Granted, that was the first horse I was on. Was an adult. Probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, was a wild horse running around in Nevada. Now he's out in Northern California with a 7-year-old in a saddle. And they were not broken. Because I just want to, my uncle's long since passed, but if you can, he knew, I think. This was a character building exercise more than it had anything to do with horses. But yeah, kids today, like, oh gosh, my own kids, put them on a wild horse. Like, I was all for it. I was like, this is great. This is exactly what I want to do with my summer is ride this wild horse around. I don't think any of my kids, there
would want to go do that.
One of them. There's one of them that would do it. Actually, there was one that wouldn't even need it to have a saddle. Actually, yeah,
my child absolutely would not. She'd be like, "Is there a joystick or a computer attached to that horse? Is this programming a horse in a computer virtual simulation? Then I'm in."
Outdoor school for kids. They should
Yeah.
actually not. When I was a kid, weren't even allowed indoors except at school, and then right as the sun was going down. Between school and the sun going down, or on a weekend, you weren't allowed to be indoors. That was only for the adults on the weekend.
Same.
You were supposed
That was my
to
childhood
leave the
also.
house and just not
Get
come
outside.
back.
Now I can't get my child to go outside. Go outside. Nah.
You have to like reverse latchkey it. Just make sure they don't have a key.
Lock them out.
Trick them. Hey, is that an Amazon box? Maybe that's a new electronic device on the porch. And then he goes out and you just lock the door behind him. Don't even explain. That's the character building part. They gotta figure it out.
Dun, dun, dun.
Just take them on a walk somewhere and get lost. I feel like that's always a good one. It's like, oh man, I thought the gaming store was right around the corner. I guess we have to walk through this park. Oh shucks.
Ah, darn. I don't know where I am anymore. It's the heater. I'm setting up my email to send to our interview with all of the details for Friday. Bum, bum, bum. All right. I'm going to go to bed.
Oh, look at that big yawn.
I'm going to go do the nighttime things.
Say goodnight.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Jinx.
Good night, Blair.
Good night, Justin.
Good
night, Kiki.
Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. So glad you could be here. And we hope that you will join us for our live stream on Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. I will be tweeting and all that kind of stuff. But thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful couple of days. If we don't see you this Friday, we'll see you next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Stay well, stay healthy, stay safe, stay curious.